Welcome, Noreen.
Hi, Chris, and everyone.
Just waiting for one more person. Quiet January afternoon.
Well, the governor just did her state of the state address. I don't know if Paul Solomon will be on this call, and I can't tell because I can't see. But Paul was one of the speakers, and he did a fabulous job talking about incarcerated folks and housing needs and that kind of thing. So kudos to him. Again, I'm not sure if he's on this in this meeting, but I'm going to send him a special note just because he really represented Lane County and the work they do really well.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that update, Noreen, and thanks, Paul, to for doing service. I don't know that he usually attends this meeting, but I certainly make mention of it at the next meeting. With seeing Mayor Van Gordon in, needs to update his tag, it looks like, but it looks like we have everybody here. Is that accurate, Diana?
Yes, it looks like we have quorum.
So we have full attendance, it looks like. So welcome everybody to the January 21st, 2021 Executive Committee meeting of the Poverty and Homelessness Board. Would like everybody to look over their agenda, and we will make a motion to approve. What, the second?
I move we approve the agenda.
Thank you, Mayor Venice.
I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Farr. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Hearing none, the minutes go forward. Just a quick round of introductions, please. We have some new people in the room, and this is our first meeting of the year. So I'll start with myself. I'm Chris McAllister. I represent the homeless adult seat on the Poverty and Homelessness Board, and I serve on several of the committees.
I'm sorry, with United Way, and I am vice chair of the committee.
Thank you, Noreen.
Lucy Venice, Mayor of Eugene.
Pat Farr, Board of County Commissioners.
Sean Springfield.
Laura Trigger, County Commissioner.
Steve Manala, I'm the Human Services Manager for Lane County.
Alex Dreer, Lane County staff, and I staff the Poverty and Homelessness Board.
Any of you would like to introduce themselves before we move on to the next portion of membership?
Hi, I'm Julia Rojas from Centro Latinoamericano. It's my first time here in this meeting.
Thank you, welcome. Here, feel free for anybody who has not spoken to introduce yourself in the chat. And like Reagan just did, thank you, Reagan. With that being said, welcome everybody. Alex Dreer, would you be willing to go over the membership segment?
Yes, and I forgot to introduce, I'm here with Kennedy Dreer, and she's eating very loudly. So you might hear that, or if you hear a burp, it's not me, I promise. I've made the agenda larger. I hope you can see it now a little bit better. Let me try one more time. There we go. Okie dokie. So as you are aware, we usually have a representative to the Poverty and Homelessness Board who represents employment, and Lane Workforce Partnership has had a representative to the board for many years. And right now, the current representative is Ashley Espinoza. Lane Workforce Partnership requested that their representative be Cindy Perry, who's the new Director of Investments, and I believe her application was forwarded to you for you to review. So if you would like to change the workforce representative from Ashley Espinoza to Cindy Perry, that would require a vote today.
Okay.
And the other matter is, representatives from the jurisdictions, which I believe Commissioner Farr already mentioned that the Lane County representatives will be Commissioner Farr and Commissioner Trieger as backup. And we have confirmation that the representative from the city of Springfield will be Mayor Van Gordon, and from the city of Eugene, that will be Mayor Vinnes. Is that correct? I see it. Yes, thank you, Mayor Vinnes. Well, excellent. Welcome, everyone, for another year term. And the other issue is youth representation. It was brought before this board in the past that we currently have a homeless youth representative position vacancy. It's been very difficult to recruit for this position. We look for somebody who's under 24, who has lived experience of homelessness, and due to circumstances, it's been very difficult to recruit and retain somebody in that position. It was discussed by the membership committee that perhaps a youth serving provider representative staff person could be on the Poverty and Homelessness Board, just so that we have more youth specific voice on the board in the absence of a homeless youth representative. So it's a question for this board whether you want to add a full position for a youth serving provider and maintain the homeless youth representative position, or perhaps another option would be to determine to have a youth serving provider in the absence of a homeless youth representative. And then you would have to determine the rules around if we had a homeless youth representative, somebody apply for that, how would we transition them on? So that's for discussion.
Thank you very much, and thank you for verifying the jurisdictions. Congratulations, Sean, on your new title, and I look forward to serving with you, continue on the Poverty and Homelessness Board. Same with you, Mayor Vinnes, and Commissioner Farr, and again, welcome, Commissioner Traeger. Does anybody want to start out with some thoughts about the youth representative idea? We had talked a little bit about it on the membership committee, knowing that we had several candidates and people tried it, and it didn't necessarily work with their schedules or being a young parent or school or other things that just came up, but we always want to preserve and protect that voice. So that's why we thought to bring it forward to this body.
I have a quick thought. This is Julia Rojas from Centro Latinoamericano. So I work with youth that some youth have homelessness in their family, in their situation, and I'm just wondering if a provider like myself, if I would work along the side with the youth, like both of us working together to take that chair, and then maybe once the youth gets more comfortable with being on its own and advocating for youth, then I can transition out, or the provider can transition out. I'm just wondering if that might be an obstacle, because sometimes youth don't necessarily understand all these committees or the agendas, and I think it's more of like a mentor for these meetings. I'm just wondering.
Yes, ma'am, that's a great question, and be happy to field that. In the past, we have considered providers. As this is a formal meeting, I'd like to give chances for each of the committee members to weigh in, and also acknowledge that we do have a public comment, so we can look around and see if there's time to bring the providers in the room into the conversation. So thank you very much for your input. But yes, Mayor Venice.
Yeah, I think that's actually an excellent idea. And I mean, it is a way in which we can encourage youth to participate by offering this as a sort of as a mentoring opportunity. It's building confidence, leadership. I think it's hard to expect as certainly a young person who's struggling in other ways to be able to manage all of this. And so I think a support system is great. I think it's, so I think Julia's suggestion is an excellent one.
And Chris, I would also echo that. I think even maybe 2 providers who are serving youth. So Julia would have also some support in that, because I think we've struggled with this for the last several years, trying to find a youth representative for all the reasons that Mayor Venice just mentioned. But maybe, you know, a couple of folks can co-chair that committee and cultivate or figure out how to make sure that we have the voice at the table, because I think it's pretty critical when we're thinking about the number of unhoused youth in our community. And it's an issue we need to get we need to be attending to. So I would suggest maybe if Julia is willing and interested in doing that we also consider maybe having her, having a colleague that could join her in co-chairing the youth committee.
Thank you for that point, Noreen. May I get some clarity from Alex on, are we talking about a seat on the Poverty and Homelessness Board with the mentor and a youth representative? Can you please give some clarity there?
Well, that is up to the board. If you wanted to take Julia's recommendation, as I heard it, we would have a youth apply for the vacancy, for the homeless youth vacancy representative, and then a mentor would accompany them, but they might not be a member of the board itself, in which case we wouldn't need to make any changes. We could just clarify that in the posting, the representative posting, that we would provide, maybe we would provide staff support, which we do, but just clarify, we're looking for providers to apply with the youth to help guide them.
Okay.
Can I just ask a clarifying question about that? If there is a meeting and the youth is not able to attend, but the mentor is, can that work as a sort of alternate, or, you know, so if we want to vote on something, we still have that voice at the table?
Do we have, Alex, in our charter, do we have proxy voting ability, or would that require a charter change?
I believe that would require a charter change. The current governance charter doesn't specifically mention proxy voting.
Chair McAllister.
Yes, Commissioner Parr.
Thanks. I think it's important to have the voice at the table, and I believe we would all agree that having somebody, an actual lived experience youth at the table is our best. However, it's always been a challenge to engage a single youth for an extended period of time, because some good things happen. Sometimes the youth becomes not homeless anymore. Sometimes they complete school and go on to the next level, whatever it may be. So there are a lot of reasons that the youth aren't there. But my question is, how robustly have we recruited? You know, have we? And you know, the answer may be very robustly, but can anybody answer how much outreach have we done to bring in the youth? For instance, have we talked to anybody at Calapooya High School, which is almost entirely populated by homeless youth?
I cannot speak for the broader outreach. I do know that League and other local agencies put out the applications. We've had in the past success with Looking Glass Youth and 15th Night Youth, and so we've reached out to projects that have been actively engaging youth, or where youth have been taking on leadership roles and representation. We've also been putting out. I believe at one point we talked about doing radio calls and just making sure that the applications are spread out on our community chains. But I think staff can speak a little bit more to the formal ways that they've recruited.
The Youth Homelessness Solutions Subcommittee of the Poverty and Homelessness Board has reached out to youth serving providers, shared the application widely, and asked providers to help youth apply and to explain, help provide some context for what the position entails. This includes McKinney-Vento liaison, so Deborah Daly, who's the representative to the PHB, has done a lot of outreach trying to engage youth, includes outreach to 15th Night, Looking Glass, St. Vincent de Paul Youth House residents. We continually do that, and that's something the Youth Homeless Solutions Work Group talks about every meeting, is how do we engage more youth to bring their voice to the table.
I would consider that to be a fairly robust outreach. Thank you, Alex, and thank you, Chris. Then let's continue that, but I would agree that having someone at the table, if it were a mentor who would have a youth typically with them, having somebody at least voicing their opinion, if not voting, you know, at least being there as a active discussion partner at the table. I would certainly agree with that. And regarding proxy voting, that's something that we should address in the not too distant future, because on the Board of County Commissioners, for instance, we do have an alternate. And I would hope and expect on the times that the voting member myself weren't there and the alternate were there, that member would be able to vote. So something we should discuss down the road. But thank you, Chair McAllister.
Thank you, sir. Would anybody else like to weigh in on this conversation before we look at some of these options?
Yes, this is Michael Gannon. I wanted
Michael?
to.
Michael, can we ask that you hold your comments for public comment, please?
If you'd like to give public comment at the end of the meeting, please type your name into the chat, or we will also ask people at the end of the meeting.
Thank you, Alex. Don or anybody else want to weigh in on this? Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I don't have anything additional to add. I think what we're talking through is the right way to approach it, and we just have to recognize the restriction that we're sort of in. And if it means that we have somebody representing their voices at the table, and occasionally we're doing everything they can to get a youth there to start to participate and mentor, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Thanks, sir. I'm curious, do we want to possibly, in mirroring our leadership on the county, have an alternate youth voice that with the mentor might be able to support more of a robust contribution, knowing that sometimes people can't make the meetings, but if there's two people potentially, then one of them might be more likely to. Just a consideration. Or we could look for more conversation with the Youth Work Solutions Group and see what they think. Do you guys see some head nods there? Cool. Then I like to forward this on to that committee, and we'll check back in with them in March, unless we have any other traction on the youth application before then, in which case let's do something via email. Oh, Noreen?
Yeah, I just wanted to check in, Chris, on process. Do we need to approve the membership? Excuse me, that you just suggested, the new reps, or does that need to go to the full board?
Alex, can we get clarity, please?
You can accept the membership in the executive committee, and we also need a decision on the workforce representative.
Some things. So we do have those 2 points. We do we have a motion to approve the representatives from each jurisdiction?
I'll make that motion, Chris. I'll move it. Yes.
And I'll second it.
Second by Lucy. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say nay. Hearing none, welcome all of our representatives formally. Is there a motion to accept the request by Workforce Partnerships to allow Cindy Perry to serve as a representative?
Chair McAllister.
Yes, sir.
I move that the Poverty Homelessness Board accept Cindy Perry to replace Ashley Espinosa as Lane First Workforce Partnership, which is the training and employment position on the Poverty and Homelessness Board. And that is an ex officio member, non-voting.
Thank you, sir.
I'll second.
Second by Mayor Venice. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Hearing none, the motion carries. Thank you. And is it the, I think I saw at least 3 head nods to send the youth item back to the youth committee, and we'll check in March without anybody applying. If they do, we'll force the issue by doing something over email or see if there's a need for an emergency meeting of the membership committee. Thank you. Is Steve interested in giving us our COVID-19 update?
Yeah, I'll give an update on COVID-19 rental assistance. And Alex, I sent you a document that maybe you could pull up. It's our most recent report year to date. So first of all, what I want to tell you is that, you know, we had received resources that you're aware of previously during the last calendar year. And then we were able to receive an additional $600,000 with the extension of the CRF funding deadline for the month of January. And so to date, we have received from Oregon Housing Community Services, it's about $7.3 million for rental assistance, and we've dispensed about 6.95. If you go down to the bottom of the page, it has the total program. So that has helped 1,732 households with rental assistance. And the other news that I have as of today is I received an email from the Department of Treasury, and Department of Treasury should be transferring, it's close to $11.5 million within 2 business days to Lane County for rental assistance. And this comes from the bill that the Congress passed back at the end of December that, you know, people have just referred to as the as a stimulus bill that included $25 billion of rental assistance. So the direct allocation to Lane County is about $11.5 million. And then additionally, we're still waiting to hear from the state of Oregon. The state of Oregon is receiving about $280 million to allocate out, and then from the Department of Treasury. And then additionally, the Legislative Emergency Board had approved $50 million for rental assistance for tenants and $150 million for a landlord rental assistance program. And that was also in December, and we haven't heard yet from Oregon Department of Housing and Community Services how they're going to implement those programs. So the other thing is in the President Biden's proposal for additional COVID-19 economic relief, there's another $25 billion nationally. So if it would be allocated the same way, we would receive, you know, directly, you know, another $11.5 million sometime, probably in the spring or whenever they finish up, if they conclude and include rental assistance in that application. So the other thing is that the Department of Treasury money can be used for both tenant assistance and landlord assistance. So either the landlord or the tenant can apply for the assistance under the program. 90% of the funding has to be spent on rent or utilities. expenses, and 10% can be spent on housing stabilization services. And then in relationship to our work with our nonprofit partners and Lane County in dispensing the rental assistance, the Department of Treasury allows for direct administrative costs. So any direct administrative costs can be claimed against the program. Indirect costs that the county or any of our subrecipients or nonprofit agencies have can't be claimed. So it's another situation where there will be costs that the county incurs and our partners in the community incur that cannot be supported by the funding source. So I just want to point that out also, even though it's a large amount of money and it allows for those costs to be deemed, there are some costs that will need to be borne by the community in order to deliver those dollars. So that's my update, and I'll take any questions that people have.
So I have Lucy, and then I'm in the queue. Is anybody else? Okay, go ahead, Lucy.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for this, Steve. I have two questions, and one is, in that we presumably learned some lessons in that first round of assisting those 1,732 households in that initial expenditure. So I have sort of two questions around, do households, do renters need a kind of assistance in accessing those funds? Is it difficult to navigate? How has that worked? And then the second piece is in terms of estimating your costs. Do you understand some sense of your costs based on having been through that first round?
Yeah, I'll answer it, and I'll let Alex be part of the conversation too. We had the person who managed the program for us, Stephanie Talbot, and she was in a temporary position. She is, she's taken our position as our new energy assistant supervisor. So she's not at the meeting today, but she can also answer any questions that either Alex or I can't answer. But I think the program went well. I think the frustration for the person out in the community is that we had to open up the applications on a first come, first serve basis. And, unlike these dollars, we didn't have a track record to know sort of what the capacity of all the providers were, over time. So I think we have a fairly well developed system for people to be able to apply. We also provided a direct line of assistance for people who were referred from public health. Public health had, people who were COVID positive, who, we had, additional, we hired extra help staff for that, and also for folks that are in our workforce programs to be able to get the direct assistance so that while they're looking for work, they could continue to be housed. So that worked well. I think the biggest issue that we're facing going forward is that the capacity the capacity within the community of providers for us to have enough staff to process applications. And we are currently working with a couple of organizations that had been involved previously that were trying to get them to consider continuing in the program. And, you know, organizations have, within nonprofit organizations, there are a lot of tugs and pulls, and some organizations have other priorities or other projects that they're working on. And so they need to balance those out. And then the other thing I would tell you too is that the Homes for Good has let us know that what their plan is, they're hoping to work with the landlord program that the state of Oregon is administering, and not the direct client program. And they were the only provider during the period of time that we did the program that before the end of the program withdrew from continuing because of the workload issue. So that's sort of where we stand. And Alex is working on those relationships, and you know, we're looking at the infrastructure. You know, the other thing we're looking at is that we are going to receive, you know, homeless prevention funds through our ESG CV application. So we sort of have to modify the program some and look at a program where there are some people who may need 3 months, some people who may need 6 months, and then, you know, the homeless prevention dollars that we'll be receiving can be used for up to a year. So having a way to screen within the upfront process to determine, you know, this is a household that, you know, even with gaining employment or other types of situations has greater barriers and will likely to need more support for a longer period of time. So those are some of the details we're working out.
Thank you, Steve. My question is, with the stabilization dollars, is that able to be used by landlords to help people who are in a program for permanent supportive housing? Maybe they're getting a voucher, and to be able to make sure that they can be supported and staying in that house, or is it meant for other types of access?
The stabilization piece, the 10% that can be spent on stabilization is to work with landlords and to work with the tenant in, you know, any of those issues that come up to, you know, mitigate issues and to provide services that are going to help to assure that the person is going to be stable while they're receiving the rental assistance and you know, perhaps longer term. So, but you know, really again, the concept here is that you know, a landlord could apply on behalf of their tenants and receive assistance. And so that will be something new that we haven't done before.
Okay. Yes, Sean? Mayor Van Gordon?
So 2 questions. So Steve, one of the things you guys mentioned was the workload on the nonprofit providers to sort of process applications and do the administrative overhead. What has the county looked at to reduce their overall, the impact of the nonprofits, their overall administrative workload?
What we've looked at to reduce their administrative, you know, again, I mean, what we've tried to do is we've tried to make the whole processing as efficient as possible. You know, using an online system and something called Cognito forms. But, you know, as you can imagine, even in trying to gather information electronically, you still have a lot of situations where you have follow-up work to do with the applicant or with the property management company. You know, the reality is that during the program that we just ran, most all of our contractors asked to convert administrative money into direct assistance. So, so it's an interesting conundrum. You know, on one hand, people are saying that they're not able to claim all their costs. On the other hand, you know, we're getting requests to convert the administrative money into direct payments. So,
yeah, so I think that says a lot about our local nonprofit community that, you know, I know that they were never rolling in cash, but if they are coming back and saying that they would like to convert more cost into actual direct payments, I think that says a lot where their head is. My suggestion would be at some point to contact the data science school at U of O and ask them for a potential solution. I could think of 4 different technology solutions, just rattling them off the top of my head, that are really tailor-made for this sort of, I submit an application, I have to check a couple of things that would help a ton.
okay, thank you. And I may have Lisa Stewart, who you know, follow up with you on that.
Yeah, yep. And then my second question is, in the scenario where the landlord is applying on behalf of a resident, how are we checking off that the payment is sort of coming off the past due rent? Do they have to sort of come back and say, you know, look, you gave me $1 and I've taken $1 off? How does that work?
Alex, do you want to address that?
Landlords fill out, they sign a legal document that says, I'm confirming if I receive this month's this amount of money, which is, say, for example, January, February, March rent, that it will, they basically sign that we're paying that and they accept that as rent. So that's a legal document, and we tell, of course, tenants to keep that.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Then the tenant gets a copy of it so that for their records. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sean. Good questions. Anybody else have questions or comments on this topic? Seeing none, thank you very much, Steve, for that breakdown. Will we be getting any follow-ups at the next meeting on where this is at, or is this pretty much once a quarter? How do we figure out what's going on?
No, I think we can give you, we'll give you an update at the full Poverty and Homelessness Board meeting, as well as if, you know, as soon as we implement, if it's before the next meeting, we'll get out information on the program to all the PHB members in the executive committee.
Thank you, sir. Would you like to carry on into the strategic plan, or is that Alex?
I'm going to introduce it, and then I'm going to hand it off to Alex. You know, we have a strategic plan that goes through 2021. It was a 5-year plan that was developed for the Poverty and Homelessness Board. And the strategic plan that we had, you know, was developed at a time before the jurisdictions started working on things like implementing some of the recommendations that Technical Assistance Collaborative did and some of the other things that we've done. So really the purpose of this item with the executive committee is that, you know, we are looking at wanting to hire, as we did last time, a consultant to work with us and work with the board on developing a strategic plan. The strategic plan that we have in place now had goals that were oriented for the community, much the same way that the TAC report and other documents do, which also had some benchmarks. You know, one of the things that we want to make sure that we do is that, we're looking at dovetailing the Poverty and Homelessness Board plan with other plans and sort of with an eye in mind of what the jurisdictions are doing, namely, Eugene, Springfield, and Lane County, but also, as we've done in these COVID years, we've reached out and we've gotten more participation from some of the smaller cities in the county and participating with us. And so part of it is in looking at having some members of the executive committee, be involved with reviewing the work plan that we would then ask for proposals for a consultant. The other thing I would say is, should this strategic plan be more oriented towards what this board wants to accomplish as a board, rather than a community plan of setting out benchmarks for lack of better terms, ending homelessness, or should it do both in conjunction with the jurisdictions and the work that Sarai Johnson is doing with Eugene and Lane County? So those are sort of some of the questions that I have, and this is sort of an open discussion, looking for guidance and then looking for volunteers to review drafts of and perhaps participate in the selection of a consultant if that's something that people are interested in doing. And Alex, I don't know, do you have something else to offer since you were involved with the first strategic plan? And
I think you covered it. I'm just interested to hear who would like your thoughts on how you envision the strategic planning process unfolding, especially given it will almost certainly be done virtually, and who would like to work to help us draft the scope of work for the consultant.
Maureen?
Yeah, I guess I'm a proponent of aligning all of the initiatives, everything that we're doing to ultimately end homelessness in our county. I think that, bringing all the various entities and organizations and initiatives together to really figure out where the gaps are and what we need to do more of. I also will volunteer to be part of the strategic planning process, reviewing the documents, but also considering what the RFP would look like for a consultant, because I think that's the way to go, particularly in this kind of environment. So those are my 2 cents.
Thank you, Noreen. Commissioner Farr? Did we lose you, sir? Test 1, 2. Commissioner Farr, were you wanting to speak after Noreen? No?
I don't know if he's able to hear us still, or if his audio left.
Gotcha. Well, we'll come back to Commissioner Farr. Anybody else like to weigh in? Yes, Mayor Venice.
Yeah, thank you. I'm with Noreen. I think that what we really need to do is alignment. It feels to me that we have so many different goals, and we actually need to be talking about the same goals. I mean, we bumped up against that already, that the PHB's goals on permanent supportive housing were different than the TAC recommendation goal. So I think there's a lot of work to be done there. But also, you know, I guess I feel like there's a fundamental question about what is the mission of this body? Like, what do we bring? What value do we add to this broader conversation about the work? And so I would hope that in any sort of strategic plan, we would address whether this body is functioning the way it really needs to function. Do we need to be setting our own goals, or do we just need to be advocating for the goals that are already out there? And there are communities that are represented, I mean, Springfield in particular, who didn't participate in the TAC report. So it's valuable to have Springfield at the table here. You know, I see that there's some gaps, but I do think this really requires a sort of a general soul searching about what are we trying to accomplish with this board, and is it setting specific permanent supportive housing goals? Is it really that we become a more of a public access point to all of this other work that's going on, that we become sort of an umbrella of information? It's not clear to me where our best value is. And so I just feel before we invest, I think the strategic planning process needs to sort of embrace that existential question for the Poverty and Homelessness Board.
Thank you, Mayor Lucy. Mayor Van Gordon.
I actually think that's a really good observation. I think that's something historically we struggled with, is there's been a lot of time and energy in the public space around this as an issue. So going into this, I'm okay with having a consultant, but I really don't think it's about offering and getting to, 15-point action plans, but instead sort of a general grounding about what the horizon looks like for us, and make sure we're all kind of walking the same direction.
Thank you, sir. I have a question to this body. When we had the last plan, we had a set of goals in 3 different categories, and we had little metrics that we either based off of previous projects, such as the veterans program, as well as some of the bigger picture tying into the build projects we want to do, like MLK Commons and things like that. Do we want to, as we look forward, try and also capture what we counted as successes in that portion as we do maybe a new look at things? Or do we want to look at it from like the ground up, from each of the jurisdictions' needs, and go that way? And I see that there's issues with both, and there's no real reason to reinvent the wheel on a lot of things, but we also don't want to say the same plan over and maybe not meet the same metrics or something like that. I yield for comments. Lucy?
Yeah, I think this is part of the soul searching, Chris, really. I mean, I think Homes for Good does their work whether or not the Poverty and Homelessness Board exists. And so, it's not clear to me that I'm not sure that's where we add value, right? If they've managed to build MLK, it's not because Poverty and Homelessness Board made it possible. It's really what they have done, what the county has done. I mean, it's a sort of a separate thing. So it feels to me that, when I think about the origins of this organization, that some of the most valuable work here is in creating a multi-jurisdictional, multi-stakeholder body in which we agree community-wide on what our needs are and recognize what each entity brings, what their contribution is. So Homes for Good providers bring certain pieces in. We hear from people with lived experience, which I think there aren't a lot of places where that happens. So that feels to me to be extraordinarily valuable, about bringing both youth voices and adult voices with lived experience into the conversation. I think as we struggle with our messaging around what are we doing for people who are unsheltered, this feels to me like a good public comment forum where a member of the public can not speak just to one jurisdiction, but multiple jurisdictions and multiple providers, that we hear the same. So I guess I'm feeling like it's, as I said before, a little bit less important that we sort of take credit for the number of permanent supported housing units that were built, that the more important piece to me feels that it is very hard for the public to know what's going on, to understand what's going on. There's so many different layers. There's often a perception that because there are still people living in tents in our community that we're doing nothing. So I feel like we have to sort of grapple with that the mission that we had 5 years ago, it has changed. I mean, there's the TAC report, there's a different kind of stronger partnership between the city and the county. The city of Eugene has stepped up with a lot of different programs with other partnerships. We're in a different place than we were 5 years ago. COVID has changed where we are. We've made some investment. But I think a lot of that work has happened. It hasn't required the Poverty and Homelessness Board for that work to happen. But this is a place where we share information and share thoughts.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Commissioner Farr, are you able to speak?
I am back, and I could hear it through the wall on Commissioner Trigger's laptop, but I'd lost it here. So I missed a little bit, but kind of heard what the mayor had to say, presuming that it's kind of consistent with what other people say. This is a multi-jurisdictional body. It's not an intergovernmental body. And so we have some difficulty there. And the difficulty is that in that it's multi-jurisdictional, we have members who are here who vote from different jurisdictions, but it's not intergovernmental. So the members there's no teeth in this organization with the other elective bodies. Other than the Board of County Commissioners. So what I have always hoped for and what I've always dreamed of with the Poverty and Homelessness Board is that it is a central place for the different jurisdictions to actually seed a more uniform county-wide set of policies that can be carried back to the boards, to the individual boards. Now we have nonprofit members also, but the governmental boards are the ones that I'm talking about right now. And so I would envision our strategic plan to, as closely as possible, mirror the language of the strategic plans of the organizations who have elected members in this board. So we look at Springfield's and Eugene's strategic plan. We do look at the Eugene strategic plan. And bear in mind that while we're all here as voting members, we all wear a lot of different hats. And so we can take items from this body back to the jurisdictions that we represent, whether it be as a committee member or as a board member or as an elected member. So that being said, I've always been a little bit disappointed that the Poverty and Homelessness Board hasn't been a little bit more forceful in its directions. Now, it's a great place for people to get together, and we do talk a lot, and a lot of things do come from this. And in fact, you have two members in this meeting right here who are also members of the Homes for Good Board, as an example of the diversity of membership that we have here. Diversity is maybe not the exact word, the breadth, the different breadth of members that we have here. So that being said, as we write our strategic plan, I would prefer personally that we look at other strategic plans and make sure that the language is pretty similar, so that when Mayor Vinnis goes back to Eugene, when Mayor Van Gordon goes back to Springfield, and I go back to Lane County, we're kind of talking in the same language at all times. I think we have a similar mission. We know what the things that we want, and we are very accomplished. But just make sure that our jurisdictions are also hearing the same things that we're talking about here. The other thing I'll mention is that the Human Services Commission is also an integral member, an integral part of the work that we do as a Poverty and Homelessness Board, of course, and it is a multi-jurisdictional board. So, once again, last thing I'll say is this board has great potential. Look around the room. Look who's sitting at the table right now. We have a tremendous potential to leverage our resources that are existent and leverage outside resources.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Traeger.
Thank you so much. I'm going to make a really brief comment, and I'm sorry to talk and then run, but I have another commitment I made before joining this board, so thank you for your grace around that. I just want to say I'm new, I haven't read the strategic plan yet, but I do know often strategic plans, strategic plans are about where are we trying to get to. Work plans are about how are we going to do it. And so I'm not sure how much the existing, I will review it, strategic plan has both those loftier sort of mission-driven kind of goals and then the actual tactical, how are we going to do it? Because to Mayor Vince's point, I think a lot of the how we're going to do it is get out of the way of organizations, agencies, and other community initiatives that are making the how happen. And so it's making sure we're aligned in some bigger picture, the what we're trying to achieve, and then the how is a work plan, not a strategic plan really. And sometimes that's where the work lives in other organizations and governments, strategic plans and work plans. I hope that's a helpful comment. A great first meeting, and I am sorry to ring off, but I look forward to working with everyone.
Ever so briefly before you leave, Commissioner, if anybody goes to our website, there is a strategic plan. It's listed there. There's also a living document that's on the website that you can click on, and it'll address, I believe, Commissioner, some of the questions that you have is how do the work plans fit into the daily business of the organizations that we report to?
Great. Thank you, everyone.
I'd also like to draw attention to the matrix that shows what we were doing over the past couple of years. So thank you, Commissioner Trigger, and we'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Mayor Van Gordon.
Don't worry, I do it all the time still anyway. I hear it gets easier. So I think the thing that I keep coming back to is, right, so we're talking about work plans, we're talking about strategic plans, and I think more broadly is the conversation about the work is sort of getting done by organizations, by committees, and how do we broadly support that. So I think there's a regulatory piece that the county is probably going to tell us we have to have this board to sort of check off certain things and process grants, right? And that's one sort of column about what are we here for. And the other column that is about what we're here for is really kind of what we're working towards now, right? Which is, how do we have a more policy-driven approach? Like the piece I would like to see is almost to get less, up and down as far as in like the power of this board is sort of left to right. It's not in verticals of organizations and overlapping plans. It's in our ability to figure out how to communicate as a broad team of teams, right? Like, so, we talked about what does Homes for Good do, but half of us also sit on the home consortium. We never talk about, how that rolls into this, right? But so I think when we get done with this next product, right, we really want something to be more flexible to what our needs are coming out of the pandemic. I don't know that a 5-year work plan is going to do it. And the other thing is, like, we've got to drive to that left to right conversation so that we walk away feeling like we're making the whole machinery of, poverty and homelessness policy in this county work together. That's what we got to get to.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to also speak to my experience with the strategic plan. I came in on the Poverty and Homelessness Board right after the first initial drafting of it. So we had a consultant talk to us about how we might interface it and get it to work. And what I really liked about our current structure, and something that I hope that as conversations continue on that we kind of double back on, there were carve out spots that allowed us to have on the timeline as a community, once we got the data, to start to meet out. So if we have so many homes for families, so many beds that are year round, how do we actually strive to make those happen? And how do we get the communities to coalesce around that? Because if we are all built for zero communities, we really need to make sure that we're building for zero instead of doing just broad sweeps and leaving it in the hands of the providers to have to network all this. So it comes from that community aspect. What I feel is one of our strongest points to be able to do that work as the Poverty and Homelessness Board in the capacity as advisory is to utilize Section 3 of our strategic plan that exists right now, is utilizing the state legislature options to organize on the local level with local government and to reach out and actually work with the providers, help them draft the ideas about what are they providing, how is their part of the system the missing pieces, and if they're not the missing pieces, how can we strengthen them to be able to connect to the missing pieces? And I really feel like our strategic plan as it was drafted before, while having its set of hiccups and knowing that the bar changes every year, every crisis, every economic boon or loss, we have to revisit some of what we're doing. I really feel like the staff put in a lot of heavy, strong lifting on trying to make it into this malleable, actable, actionable plan. And so I feel like there's elements of work plan and elements of the strategic plan. And I really hope that we leverage more advocacy for the unhoused options, to support more bills and efforts to help the unhoused options, as building for housing options only does so much. And that again speaks Mayor Van Gorden's point of going across the spectrum. If we are just doing housed work, then our unhoused have no voice. I yield. Staff, would you like to speak to anything about your thoughts on the process as it went or as it might be?
I think this has been good discussion. I've been taking notes, and Alex as well. And so I think that, and I think members on the executive committee have spoke up who want to be involved in the process. So thank you. I think it's been a very good discussion.
Thank you. If it's lost, I am also interested in being part of this conversation. So thank you. We will follow up again. Should we have this on the next agenda and for the all members, just to let them know what we're thinking and get some more input? Okay, excellent. Thank you for that. Do we have Devin available to talk a little bit, and Sarai to talk a little bit about communication plans and our capacity as an advisory board?
Indeed, we are. I'll let you take it away, Devin, and I'll fill in any blanks.
Thank you, Sarai. Thank you, Chair McAllister. So I will admit that I've got a little bit of an idea of what this request is about, but maybe not the full picture. I've been thinking about the work of the Poverty and Homelessness Board, how it fits into the county structure specifically, as well as the type of outreach we do for other programs that we have that are of a similar service-oriented nature. The Poverty and Homelessness Board is in sort of a mid-ground place. You know, you're not a standalone organization or entity or department, but you interact with and support a lot of work across county, city, and other partner agencies. My proposal in sensing that the ultimate desire from this group is to have more people understand the type of work the PHB is supporting would be to work through partners. I don't know that this group is set up in a way that it makes sense to have your own specific outreach done by this group specific to the Poverty and Homelessness Board. I'm also trying to look at it in a sense of equity with some of our other mandated committees too, and how they're allowed to operate and how they're not. And again, you're still not quite in the exact same category, and I recognize that. But we have so many wonderful partners whose work is supported through the funding, guided and directed by this group. They're out there communicating about their on-the-ground victories and their tangible victories in ending homelessness in our community. It would be wonderful to work through them to come to an agreement that when any of us are communicating about a project or progress in a service that's funded through the PHB, that a statement to that effect is included as we put that information out. And I think that accomplishes a couple of things that could be beneficial to this group. One, I think it heightens the awareness in the community and in our local media of the Poverty and Homelessness Board and the role that this group plays in the work. But I think it also ties that to tangible victories and positive things in the community, so that we're, one, likely to get coverage, because people like to cover and talk about tangible things. They don't necessarily appreciate trying to break down budgets and contracts typically in the media, at least not anymore, unless there's something horribly wrong with it. And people like to see the tangible progress being made. And I think if we can find a way to ensure there's some information about how that work was supported and prioritized through the Poverty and Homelessness Board, it gets that greater recognition in the community while keeping the focus on the work being done in a way that I think we can make palatable to local media and in a way that's easy to explain to residents, because it's easy to show the value of something when you're demonstrating the tangible work. That was just my initial thought. I would love to hear more from this group, especially if it's something that you've had a lot of previous discussion on.
Thank you, Devin. I want to just speak to why I requested for this to be on the agenda, if I may. And then if anybody would like to follow up with questions or support, I'd be happy to have that happen. The reason why we originally picked this is in the previous chair's work, who did a lot of PR and outreach type work, we had talked about having the body be able to speak to our own successes as a body. What are our multiple jurisdictional successes? What is it that the county is working on with its continuum of care work, with its financing projects, with partnerships, to be able to say, this is what collaboration looks like, this is what our community needs, and this is where we are actually moving the benchmark a little bit, moving that gauge. And so it can sometimes be confusing about who can write a letter to the editor on behalf of work, who can be able to do something where it's not stepping on the toes of the already existing communication work of the county and local jurisdictions, but also being able to put it in this congealed and easy to understand like network. So when we lead to the TAC report, and then we go to the next steps, can the community visualize it? Can the community grab it? Can each community go, this is my part, this is our part, this serves our people? And so how do we engage and engender that to where people can get involved and maybe start to support those programs, maybe start to look for places to put those palette structures that we got as a community, and as we're looking to support them as a community. That was more of the idea where we were taking to spin off of from the last chair's great work in building awareness about what we do and where we go. But I was liking to see 2.0. I yield to anybody on this topic. Mayor Venice?
Yeah, I really appreciate that, Chris. That was an excellent summary. And what occurs to me, to building on the previous conversation about the strategic plan, is that, when at the staff level, when city staff or county staff are looking at homelessness programs, they're connected, like they're doing that work with one another. We have in this body elected folks who are not, I don't do implementation of homeless projects, right? I put a voice to that and create that as a priority. So I think there's a potential here is, at the staff level where the work plan is, where the actual work is happening, that happens. If this body conceives of itself as that sort of umbrella policy voice organization, then what Devin is saying to us really makes a lot of sense in terms of there's a coherent message. We're actually all saying the same thing about how broadly, as multi-jurisdictional organization, we are speaking to this issue and addressing the issue. It takes some of the frustration away that Commissioner Farr is expressing of, we don't have any teeth. Well, actually, the teeth are with the staff. The staff make it happen, right? If a policy board says, let this be so, that implementation will happen. So just, I think there's an opportunity there for us to recognize who's at the table here and who's actually doing the work. And it really, how do we make the most of those two roles through this body?
Chair McAllister. Thanks. To carry on what the mayor said, the Poverty and Homelessness Board is a part of Lane County's Human Services Department. and Steve Bonnell is the head of that department. It's embedded in here, so naturally it does have a direct link with the county and with human services. But what really is powerful about this board, Mayor Venice, and I'm looking at the people here, is the fact that we all do talk about the same values. And after these meetings, I find myself quoting Noreen Dunnell's, pretending they're my words. No, I don't. I never do that, Noreen. But for instance, I mean, we have the power of us all being together, all that potentially having the same message and going forward with it. And that really becomes the key, is that we're all saying the same thing from so many different angles. And this board has been powerful for the last 6 years. It has powerfully addressed and enlightened people about the work that we do as a group. For instance, how many people read the cover article on the from Eugene Weekly last week? I would expect you did, Mayor Venice. You were quoted extensively. Chris, you were extensively. I was quoted extensively, and Sarai Johnson's on the call. She was quoted extensively. And it kind of weaved around the Poverty and Homelessness Board a little bit and the work that we do. So the word is out, and as long as we're able to follow it through with the same language, which we do a pretty good job of, by the way, then we're going to continue to elevate attention in people's, in the community's mind. And the net result is that when we want projects to move forward in places where the neighbors, for instance, are reluctant to have them, then we can speak with a combined voice that enables it engenders the trust. It brings the trust of the people who are hearing us, if we're all saying it at the same time. And that's the power of this board. And that's the work that we've done. As Pat was the chair, as Chris is the chair, and as Kitty Piercy was the mayor, and as Christine was the mayor, and as we evolve, that's the power that we have, is to speak with the same language. And that way people know we're telling the truth and people trust us. And I love that part. Chair, thank you.
Chair?
Yes.
I was just gonna give a little bit of information about historically what Pat had done previously with the communication plan, the Pat who was the chair. And that is that you'll recall that the Poverty and Homelessness Board did a number of op-ed pieces, also met with the editorial board of the Register Guard. And then that ended up creating, this was under the old ownership of the Guard, but then from that, the Register Guard decided for a year to do weekly stories on homelessness, as a result of that activity. And so again, I think it's an example of what board members are talking about, that the collective of the public officials and the other people representing organizations and lived experience who are on this board, if you come together with a similar message and have similar goals around education, it can be very useful.
Thank you, Steve. Noreen, did you want to say anything before you take off?
I was just putting a long message in the chat, Chris. I was just going to say, I'm sure that we all are getting this, but every single day, I kid you not, I am asked, what are we doing for our unhoused population in Lane County? And there's not a day that goes by without having that question come up. And so this body really helps connect the dots on the various strategies and activities that we're all working on. And I will also say that it's helpful and informative in terms of our funding and other philanthropic organizations that are also providing funding to various nonprofits in the community. So for instance, my colleague and I are on a regular once or twice a month call with OCF, with Ford Family Foundation, as a linkage for some of the information around some of our different population issues. And this, of course, is at the top of the list. And so I would just say, Devin, I don't know how helpful that is, but I do think we need to talk about the partnerships and the work that is being done. And we obviously can't claim it all, but we're all part of it. And that speaking with one voice, Pat, I think is a really good, most important idea in terms of how we move forward thinking about the strategic plan, yes, Lucy, I agree. We need to have alignment. We need to have a sort of a North Star on what is the role of this body as we move forward. And things have changed so dramatically in the 5 years since that strategic plan was written and put together. So I just think that we all know we have a lot of work to do, but there is definitely a role for this body. And it's certainly helpful for me as I communicate with individuals and with other funders, actually, quite frankly. And I'm sorry, I do have to pop off because I have to run to another meeting. Yeah.
I will report you on that, Noreen.
So, Sarai, would you like to maybe give a few minutes on your thoughts on this, and then Devin, if she has any response, and then we'll go into public comment.
Sure. I mean, to be really honest, I think that we're in a good moment to take a look at how all of the different lanes that we've kind of had going could in some way converge, and part of that is communication. I do know that one of the things on our docket is to develop a website that's really specifically speaking to the work that we're doing around the shelter feasibility and system analysis that is also known as TAC. So that I think will be really useful to us. And that process could also integrate feedback from this group and sort of create some centralized messaging that we can share across multiple different efforts. I also would really love for that process to be something that's inclusive of voices who might access that website, whether it's community stakeholders, housed people that are curious about what's going on or what they can do to help, businesses, other stakeholders like people with lived experience, obviously, advocates, service providers, and others in the community who might access that website about what they'd like to see and how it can best be presented to them. So that is something that we have on our kind of what we're trying to do. Right now I'm in a process of kind of working with the policy team and others involved in the TAC work on creating some work plans and sharing what those things might look like that kind of help bring together some of these efforts. So that I think will be one of those pieces of the work plan, and I would like to see some progress on that this year, as you know, in the relatively near term, once we get through some of the more emergency like pressing issues that we have to deal with right at hand.
Thank you, Sarai. Devin, did that help a little bit?
It does helps. I really appreciate the perspective and the reminder of, you know, back in the glory days of having a local editorial board, what we were able to accomplish. I do think a similar mechanism is still the most appropriate. So it's that cohesive message, but each of your organizations and the community that you are accountable to, you have different mechanisms to reach out to them. So I think it's worth exploring how do we create that common message, and then how do we have you as a leader in your organization help disseminate that to your audience. And again, so it would be, you know, Mayor Vinnis or Mayor Van Gordon or Commissioner Farr or, you know, Executive Director McAllister, you know, on behalf of your organization, here's the plan, here's how we're involved, and this is the great work of the Poverty and Homelessness Board. So I think that's where we have opportunity to get powerful messaging out in ways that people want to hear it, right? Because the same people that want to hear a message from Mayor Van Gordon aren't looking to Mayor Vinnis for that leadership, right? Often it's simply a geographic issue for a lot of you, and making sure that we're using all the tools in our toolbox to get that information out. So especially as this group is looking at re-engaging the strategic plan, I think that's a great opportunity. We'll just have to be more creative, you know, without that same presence of a strong local media and editorial board, in looking for other ways to have the information vetted and shared as well. And I think it's worth considering paid opportunities potentially, PSAs, things like that. But again, I think it's that decentralized communication and sharing of a message that has been developed and is very clear and represents all of the members, if that makes sense.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much for your thoughts on this. And if anybody has any more questions, I'm sure we can reach out to you.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Sarai and Devin, for your thoughts on this, and thank you for your explanation. Steve, I'd like to open this up for the public comment. If you would like to have public comment, please put your name in the chat, and we will be happy to hear you. We have approximately 8 minutes left for this meeting. So are there any takers for public comment? Well,
So far, I don't see any in the chat. If you want to give public comment and you can't access the chat, you can also unmute yourself and say that you want to give public comment.
thank you, Alex.
Hello.
Yes. Yes?
Hi, this is Michael Gannon.
Yes, sir.
I have some comments to make. I'm assuming you hear me.
Yes, sir. Go ahead. Thank you, Michael.
I first wanted to comment about the idea of having a youth. And that's, I think that quite a bit more thought needs to be put into the how you would utilize feedback from a youth. And I think that both since that discussion, Lucy Venice and Devin Ashbridge have asked questions that I think any youth would ask, not because of the difficulty of understanding what you're trying to accomplish, what you're willing to do to accomplish any of the things that you talk about. So from a practical standpoint, I think you have to offer a youth an honorarium to attend. And you have to be, in the era of COVID, you have to be reckoning with how they could access the meeting on a computer or a phone. And it would seem like, along with the honorarium, you might want to offer them a telephone if they don't have one, or help maybe offer the honorarium or a portion of it, or in addition to it, you could subsidize their phone. Otherwise, the difficulty of communicating with this body is sort of extraordinary and very unlikely that you would find a youth who is struggling to survive, who could have the time and energy to put into this discussion and not be able to see any rewards that would come from their commitment. I also wanted to comment about the money that's coming to deal with people being evicted and landlords. I think it's really important for agencies to be able to offer a significant counseling to people who are in danger of being evicted. And I think the comparison that you might want to look at would be how landlords are so well organized. They belong to different kinds of groups and they lobby for each other, and they are investors who have chosen real estate purchases as a way to invest. But I think we have to consider other sorts of investments. And like the best example that I think would be is in the stock market. If a person is invested in the stock.
Do me a favor, since you don't have your mask on, you mind just flip it around on the other side of the fence right there so you're not on my property and you still don't have your mask on? I realize you're talking and everything, but thank you.
So I'm at the dining room wanting to get a little sack lunch, and typical situation just happened where homeless people are pushed to do things like, here I am and out in the parking lot, miles away from anybody. Would I get off their property and unless I put my mask on, which I can't really do, and talk on the phone? this is the sort of thing that a youth would run into and would want somebody to help them out if they confronted these problems which come to them like a rushing stream while they're on the street. So back to the evictions, I think that you will be likely to see what we've seen with the previous expenditures from the federal government, is that most of the money goes to people who are well positioned, already have a significant cash flow, and protect that cash flow. So here is an opportunity for local agencies to step in and help people who face evictions get help before the money goes completely to the landlords, which is not supposed to, but it's very likely to. Finally, I'd like to say that I used to go regularly to the Poverty and Homelessness Board, and I had the questions that Devin and Lucy asked about what are you trying to do? What is the strategic? And Devin in particular mentioned the tangible outcome that might be seen and whether or not people can contribute to making that tangible outcome. When you dismiss public comments in the regular conversation, I think there's a much better way to do that. Maybe you just give the public a 1 minute chance to make some comment about an issue that's happening, because it's when that issue is being discussed, it's more likely to be pertinent to make a comment. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for your public comment, Michael, and always open to hearing how we can better receive both input and also share the output of our community. I would like to draw to your attention that all of our representatives who serve in lived experience are given a stipend on the Poverty and Homelessness Board. So there is a stipend or honorarium, so to speak, for our youth members. And so thank you again for your public comment. Thank you everybody for being here at the first meeting rather of the year. Still catching up. If there's any items that you'd like to see on the next agenda for the executive meeting, or any responses that you'd like to share, given the conversations here, please feel free to reach out to myself or Alex, and we will see about where it fits best. So thank you all for all you do. Meeting adjourned.